Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. Today an exciting video for you. We have a preview of the upcoming iniBuilds A300-600R aircraft, the Airbus. Now I will of course explain what exactly that means and why it's got such a complex name in just a moment, but this is of course a variation on the A310 that Airbus have already had represented in Microsoft Flight Simulator by iniBuilds already. This is a more advanced simulation with more details, more graphical upgrades, and so on. And it's also a slightly different aircraft in several ways. So do stay tuned if you'd like to find out exactly why. This aircraft was kindly sent over as a preview version by iniBuilds. So of course it's not the final product yet, but hopefully coming very soon so you can enjoy it in the simulator should you choose to. This will be a payware aircraft, of course. So as I said, the A300-600R is a stretched version of the A300, Airbus's original aircraft. It is a wide-body twin-engine aircraft. It can, of course, do long haul, although it was quite well suited to sort of medium haul routes at the time. It is one of the first of the generation to have just two pilots, so a very interesting mix of analog and digital systems, and yeah, it's a very interesting airplane all round. And in this video we'll see some of the new features that iniBuilds have provided, such as the maintenance actions, the wear of the aircraft, and of course the system simulations. This won't be a tutorial on the airplane. I won't be following procedures for the aircraft. I am a real-world pilot. I currently fly the Boeing 787. I previously flew the Airbus A320 for many years in the real world, but for this video will not be using any procedures. This is just to show you this model in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Right, let's get started. So here we have the iniBuilds A300-600R. This is a variant of the original Airbus A300, which was of course their first aircraft, at least their first official Airbus aircraft. They have obviously heritage going back further than that, but this was the later version of the original A300. The A300 spawned many variants, including the A310 of course, but we've also seen the A300B1 was the original version, then there was the B2, and obviously there B3 and B4. The B4 600 version, which is what we have here, is the stretched version of the original aircraft to have more seating capacity. They've also modified it in a few different ways. They removed the outboard ailerons, and they also increased the weights, added trim tanks in the tail to give it a bit more range. So what you have here is a sort of a pretty high-end version of the A300 aircraft. It was the later version, and they also in this package have the freighter version of the A300-600R, which was the last A300 being built and sold, which surprisingly was sold all the way through into the early 2000s. So it was being made for longer than I originally realized, considering this was first flying around in the 1980s. So yeah, this is obviously in the American Airlines livery, and there are plenty of liveries included on the ini Manager already free of charge when this releases. Strangely enough, the A300 is involved in some of the more famous unfortunate incidents involved in aviation, including the Air France Flight 139, which was hijacked and flown to Entebbe in Uganda. It was also involved in a crash from JFK where the rudder was ripped off after over-controlling following a wake turbulence incident. There was also the Iran Air Flight 655 A300, which was shot down by an American Navy ship, mistaking it for an Iranian F-14. And there was the DHL, or on behalf of DHL, a European Air Transport A300 that was shot down after takeoff from Baghdad. Sorry, I say shot down, it was hit by a missile, and it did eventually land, but it landed without any hydraulic system, so the pilots flew that using just the engine's thrust and asymmetric thrust. An amazing bit of flying, and they got the airplane down in pretty much one piece. So it has been involved in several rather astonishing incidents, but there we go. So this initial version will come with the GE CF6 engine, Pratt & Whitney engine coming for free later on. They're aiming for, I believe, the first quarter of 2024. So that'll be a free update, but you get the, as we said, the A300-600R and the A300-600RF, the freighter variant, which we will look at a bit later in the video. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the exterior model of this passenger version, and as you would expect, it is really super. As you look down at the details, they're all here. As I said, this aircraft does not have outboard ailerons. It just has the inboard ailerons, which Airbus took to using on this aircraft and the A310. That was something they realized with the A310. Strange because, of course, for the A330, A340 family, Airbus went the other way, and certainly on the A330 they only had outboard ailerons, whereas Boeing used both outboard and inboard ailerons. But there we go, the sort of constant changing of technology from these different aircraft manufacturers. You'll see here, this is the high detailed textures I have installed, and it just looks absolutely brilliant all round, there's no doubt. But this video is as I say, a preview version, and it's here for you to make up your own minds, really, not for me to review it as such, as just show you what this aircraft is. As you move down, you'll see the modelling around the gear and so on. It's really, really just lovely. Yeah, oh, there we go, really detailed. There's the ground power unit plugged in, that yellow cable, just one on this aircraft. It's not the biggest aircraft in the world. I didn't quite appreciate how the size of the A300-600R. But yeah, it has 171, just over 171 ton max takeoff weight. So it's heavy. An A320 is about, a normal 320 would be somewhere in the 70 ton region. 321's in the 90 ton region, a really heavy one. So yeah, 171 tons, which is heavy. But then the aircraft I currently fly, the 787, that is typically in the 250 ton up to getting closer to 300 tons. So yeah, not the biggest aircraft in the world. I was a little surprised. I thought it was bigger for some reason. But yeah, there we go. It takes about 53 tons of fuel, so not the biggest fuel tanks either. Again, my only comparison would be the 787, which takes about, it can take over 100 tons of fuel. But of course, the A320 takes about 18 tons of fuel, so it all varies. So very much a mid-sized aircraft, I'd say. Bigger than the short-haul 320, but not as big as a lot of the modern-day long-haul aircraft. There is a fully modelled cabin, as you can see here, which shows off the what seating we got, 2, 4, 2. So pretty wide. It is certainly a big wide body. And this fuselage cross section was later used in the A330 and A340 family of aircraft. So well used, just like Boeing took the 737 and put it on to 707 became the 737, didn't it? So there we go. So not the longest fuselage, but there it is. It does have a full modelled cabin as well, which is pretty great. I like these slowly windmilling fan blades as well, really nicely modelled, and you can see here the markers they've labelled each blade. This is something done because of course it's very important that fan blades are balanced correctly, so all this stuff is counted for. They will balance individual fan blades from each other and all sorts because of the high RPM they spin at. So yeah, that's nice detail. Haven't seen that before in a flight sim aircraft. I noticed as well this under the wing, this comes straight, or this is used later in the 320, this system. I'm not entirely sure why these are like this, but they seem to connect to the fuel pumps. But there must be a reason, I'm sure. But yeah, some things you recognise between this aircraft and the A320, certainly things that they carried across in their design philosophies. And of course the famous wingtip fence at the end, which survived a long time and grew into a slightly larger feature on the more modern Airbus aircraft, and eventually replaced by the sharklet. Inside now, and you'll be relieved to see that the checklists are installed, so that is always good. I like this. So we can go up to the batteries, and then we tick a little I, and it would show us them, and then need to go into auto. So 3 batteries into auto, tick. Hydraulic panel, check. Basically checking we haven't done anything, but we do have fluid. Tick. Wiper switches off. They are lower down. They are in the middle, off. Gear lever down, which it is. Put the seat back. There we go. Gear lever down. Tick. Slats, flaps in agreement. So that is handle up, and the indicator showing 0 because it is a mechanical gauge on this aircraft. And reversers down. That's up. So we want them down. Tick. Fuel levers off. These are the fuel levers off, and weather radar off, which is loaded. Where do they load the weather radar? Down here, and it's in the off position. This is very, very similar to the A320. External power if available, we can switch that on. So it's down here, external power, and it does say avail. So we'll turn it on. APU fire system test. So you can run the script tests on the separate fire systems, do the loop test as well. We can tick that, and then you can turn on the APU by going to the APU panel down here. It says APU master switch on. On. I like that. It even moves the camera for you. Very good. APU start switch on, so you press that, it starts, and then now that's all up and running, we're getting electrical power into the airplane. We can align the IRSs. They're in a slightly unusual layout on this aircraft, again similar to the A310. A lot of this will be very familiar if you fly the A310. So these checklists continue on. There are 90 items in the flight deck preparation checklist. These would be done on the real aircraft as flows, of course. So you would flow through the overhead panel and run those. So typically you'd start on the overhead and run down or up these panels depending on the way your aircraft manufacturer recommends. There are unusually 5 columns on this overhead panel. It's a bit more of a complex overhead panel than we're used to in the 320 because, of course, this is one of the first aircraft to not have a flight engineer. The flight engineer has been replaced, rather sadly, by this this panel back here, which does have a few things like the APU instrumentation and so on if you wanted to look at that, and it even has the look at that events counter, operating hours ticking along. So yeah, so there is a lot of information on this overhead panel, but it's actually really quite straightforward. And if you're used to the A320, and certainly of course it's pretty much identical to the A310, then you'll be able to handle this. Pretty straightforward. Relying on the IRSs, if we just ran through our flows, we'd see that these computers are down, the hydraulics aren't pressurized. I can put the dome light on so you can see me a bit better. We're bright on the light switches. Seatbelt signs you could put on as we finish fueling, no smoking to on, and there you go. We'll put the strobe light to auto, nav lights on, leave the anti-ice all off. We'll leave these off until the IRSs are aligned. We'll give power to the galley, and the APU power will be online very shortly if it isn't already. And then we can come up here. We can use this to check the power of the APU generator, so I can see when it's online. So it looks like it is online, so that's good news. So we do have APU power, and we'll leave the the HF radio alone. This is for long range radio. Moving down this side, this is a backup for the landing instrumentation, another VHF radio if we need it. The fire detection loops we could do. Fuel pumps can all usually come on. I'm not 100% certain of the SOPs for fuel pumps on the A300-600R variant, but it's typical to turn all the fuel pumps on an Airbus, and then they will automatically not run if not needed. But you can see here we have the trim tank pump in the back, so that is a key difference of this from early A300 aircraft. And I think the A310, I'm not sure if the A310 had that trim tank. The reason you have a trim tank in the back of these aircraft is that airplanes are most efficient with a certain center of gravity. So we don't want the center of gravity too far forward, otherwise it burns more fuel. But if it's too far back, the airplane will be out of trim and unstable. And center of gravity, I mean where the average weight is in the airplane. So it's ideal if you can have a fuel tank in the tail, you can pump fuel to it during the flight and balance the airplane to be the most efficient for the cruise. It's quite a clever system, used in lots of aircraft, including the A3, I believe it's in the A380, it certainly was on the 747-400s, and of course Concorde had to use a lot of trim tanks to keep itself stable for each phase of flight as it went along the different Mach numbers. You don't see it so much these days. The Boeing 787 doesn't have a trim tank in the tail at all. They've designed the aircraft to balance hours a bit better without needing that, and they've got other systems in place to counteract the benefits of a trim tank. The problem with a trim tank, of course, is it's more to go wrong. It's more fuel lines, and it could potentially mean you have that fuel stuck in the tail, not where you want it. So that could be an issue. But there we go. That is the system, and they've got it here. We can see we are fuel on board, engine start panel, APU is on and available, wipers off. This is our pressurization. You can see the outflow valves are in the open position. Again, all very similar to the A310, if not identical. Probe heat's on, window heat's on. Moving up, oxygen. Now I do need to turn the oxygen on, but I'm trying to remember where the button for that is. Ventilation for the cargo and the equipment we're leaving alone, and then moving on to the other side. Pack control, air conditioning panel, pack valves, which are just on. So we'll give it bleed air in just a moment from the APU by turning that on, and that will give air to the packs, and we'll get air conditioning in the cabin. So as you can see, it doesn't actually take that long to go through it all. But if you don't like that idea, and by the way, there's plenty more to talk about in this aircraft, which we'll come to later. I quite like this worn out panel down here. This is the systems and effectively ECAM or ICAS control. But there you go, you can see all the different bits. And of course, iniBuilds have modeled the systems. So if we go into here, we can see things. Let's go to APU, and you'll see the different systems all running. The bleed PSI now, we've turned it on. If we go to engine, we should see the oil quantity, temperature, they go 18, 17. Same for the hydraulics, they should show depressurized. Yep. So these are all these systems are of course modeled in the airplane as you would expect. But we can go into the EFB. So they've included a functioning EFB where you can calibrate your throttles, nice and straightforward. So I've got mine calibrated here for all the usual. There's no climb on MCT gates in this aircraft, of course. It's got max reverse, idle, and toga, and that's it. So I'll leave them there. if we go back, we can go to aircraft maintenance, and this is quite fun. You can see if you're running out of oil, you can service them and service the tires and so on. You'll get a brake wear indication. Really, really nice, really good bit of fun. And we'll see the emergency slides in just a moment. And if you do that, you can open up the cowlings and get an engineer to go and work on them. Quite a good bit of fun this. I like having a model where you can open bits up. It feels more like a miniature of the real aircraft, so that's a good bit of fun. I'm assuming this is the engine control unit, but anyway, I won't go too far into guessing at what I'm looking at underneath the cowling. Not something pilots are privileged or expected to know, really. We just have a rough idea of what it looks like under there. But yeah, the latch cowls are open. I like it a lot. It does actually animate if you open it and close it as well, which is really nice. We have the APU running, but unfortunately our engineer is working on the APU at the same time. They would not be impressed about that. If an engineer was working on the APU like this, they would put up a placard in the flight deck. So there will be a big sign saying, do not touch this airplane under maintenance. Don't touch anything, because it's of course incredibly dangerous to start up an APU while an engineer might have their hands or even just be this close to it with the noise it makes. But it is interesting to see the APU, because we always refer to it, or I often refer to it as a little jet engine in the tail, but it doesn't really resemble one at all, as you can see there. This is the air inlet, and then as we come round, you can see the way there is drawn in and up, and then the actual sort of jet engine as such is here, and then exhaust out over the back. But yeah, they are formatted quite differently to obviously a traditional engine. There you go, you see some of the details on the tail there. Quite something, quite something, really nice. Of course, something you would expect is if I go to settings, I can go to on APU, and the airplane will now be a bit more ready to go, sitting on its APU, and yeah, it's almost in a ready to go situation now. And you can load up the FMC with your route. So we are in Newark KEWR, and we're going to go to let's go back to Newark KEWR, put that in, and this is very familiar to anyone used to an A320 aircraft. Will be our test call sign as always, and align the IRSs. There we go. Moving on to the next page. Yeah, it's all very familiar. We have our 20 tons on board, so of course weight and balance is all done through here. So in the EFB, of course, you can load up your weight. I've put in the figures that I want. Gives us a zero fuel of 89.5 tons. So I'll just type 89.5. Block fuel, we have 20 tons in total. And here's our numbers. Not be quite enough fuel to do what we want to do, but I'm sure that'll be fine for what we're actually going to do. And there's our GPS primary, so the IRSs are now aligned to good. And I will put in the departure. And we'll take off from 04 right. Newark 4. Insert. Pretty much straight ahead. And then we'll get vector from air traffic control, just see how the airplane flies. Good news is we can just push back using the EFB. So if we were to press backwards like that, it says aft pushback started. And you'll see outside the tug connecting to the airplane. And we've removed all the ground equipment from the other sides. I love the same on their A310, the way they have the stretching of the metal around the front of the fuselage. It's really great, looks really fantastic. So we should push straight back here, and then we'll taxi out. And I'll show you what happens with the doors. Of course, performance is included in here, so you can synchronize that for your conditions and your config. Then click calculate. There we go, flex 63, 54, 63, 63. So I'm going to put 163 in here. And just have a look down here at takeoff, and I'm going to put numbers in. So 154, 163, 163. 163, but the V2 comes from the FCU, and we're going to go with a flex of, we just said, 63 degrees, so we can do flex takeoff, and set this to 63. Quite a simple system, and then it lowers the target N1 up there. So that's set. There we go, flex 53. Lovely. Right, let's start up the engines. Very Airbus-y. We're going to set this to start. Actually, this is an extra step. So set it to system A, start engine 1, press start. We can see N2 accelerate. There will be a number that it needs to reach, which should be included in the checklist. Here we go, start procedure. Once it reaches 20% N2. There it is. Then we can add fuel. Now I expect to see fuel flow increase, which it has. And shortly after, I want to see an EGT rising, so I know the engine has lit up. There it is. Good, so I have set the performance. We're doing a flap 15/15 takeoff, so we've got 15 and 15, so it's 15 on the slats, 15 on the flaps. Airbus later simplified this a lot, thankfully. We've also got our V2 in here, 163. I've set 4,000 feet to climb to initially, and we've got the runway heading over here. You can see the flight mode enunciators are giving us SRS heading out nav. These modes are a bit strange for now, but what will happen is we will press this button over here, which is the ATC button, but in the purposes of the iniBuilds, once we press this, it will engage the toga buttons, the toga switches from the thrust levers, and then they'll drive forwards, engaging auto thrust and targeting our 95.8 N1 for takeoff. Right, let's get taxiing over. So I've put the nose light to taxi, I've turned off the APU. We set the flaps. We can also turn off that ignition system. There we go. Lots more things we can do. This will not be a full tutorial. This is just me showing you around, seeing what you think of the airplane. So let's go. We're going to release the parking brake and get ourselves moving. Fantastic sounds, by the way. I'm just going to turn them up a bit so you can enjoy them. Rolling forward because we're very light for this aircraft at the moment. On the runway then, I'm sure you'd like to hear a proper takeoff. We want to hear those engines roar. They make a real buzzsaw sound, quite familiar for Airbus aircraft actually, but there we go. So we're ready to go. What I'm going to do is turn on the audio for you, and I'll just talk through it as we go. So hopefully you can hear those engines. Right, so parking brake is released. A little bit of forward pressure on the yoke, no side stick of course. It's going to stabilise those engines. Funnily enough, they've modelled the actual little needles which show the target for the engine. So see that needle that shows what I'm aiming for, and then the white larger needle is showing me what the engines are actually delivering. So I can move that target quite responsively, and then the engines sort of lag behind. So that's a great feature that a lot of modern aircraft have, showing you what you're commanding versus what you're getting. Very important. Anyway, yeah, so holding it on the brakes, stabilise the engines. I'm going to assume about 50% N1, but I don't know for this aircraft. Release the brakes, press the button, and it now drives the engines up. You can see them moving on their own. Slightly different system to our A320. Thrust, SRS, that is in heading, going to engage nav, that's absolutely fine. And you can see here it's now reached 96.2. We wanted 95.1, so it's overdone it slightly on the thrust. That's pretty good. Happy to have a little bit too much thrust. Stick to neutral, or yoke to neutral I should say. Now it's rising the nose a little bit early, so I'm guessing that means our trim is not in balance with what we think we have. There we go, so just keeping it on the ground. Rewind, rotate, and up we go. Positive rate, gear up. Not sure why we're getting 80s now. So let's see how the aeroplane handles. This is a very manual aircraft. It does not use fly-by-wire system. So if we disconnect the autopilot, there's the warning. You'll see that as I roll using the yoke, of course, and this is using cables, remember, not fly-by-wire, it does not have the flight control protections we're used to in the Airbus. So it will allow me to roll it all the way round. So there you go. So we'll roll to the nearest horizon, bring the power back, and then pull up back to that horizon gently. Shouldn't stall quite that easily at 300 knots. So there we go. So yeah, very, very traditional aeroplane in that sense. This aircraft, it is before Airbus took to their what they're famous for, really, their fly-by-wire controls now. So yeah, you'll notice as well, I'm sure it has some protections. I can hear the auto thrust kicking in there, but yeah, oh no, it's just the manual thrust kicking in. But yeah, it also has quite slow roll rate, with just those inboard ailerons and roll spoilers. Quite a unique setup, and as I said earlier, something that Airbus moved away from. They went for the outboard aileron technique, whereas Boeing continued to have both inboard and outboard ailerons and roll spoilers on their aircrafts. It's quite responsive, surprisingly lively, but slow in the roll rate. Certainly, that's full deflection there, and it's quite slow. Whereas the pitch is very responsive. If we idle it and put out those spoilers, we can try a bit of a stall. This is pretty low to be stalled in this aircraft. I always find the A300 strange to look at because it has no wing box. Most modern airliners have a sort of slightly square cross section as you get around where the wing joins the fuselage, but the A300 just doesn't have it. It just sits there with this sort of round tube with wings sticking out of it. I really like it. Let's get it back into the stall, see how it behaves. All you do to unstall an airliner is put the nose down. That's the most important thing. Then you roll wings level and then adjust power as needed. And we might put out some slats if we get the opportunity. So there you go. The thrust has kicked in, and there's the stall stick shaker. But the thrust has pushed us it's so powerful and we're so light, it's actually pushing us up out of the stall anyway. So I'll just push the nose down. But there you go. So there are some protections Airbus have thought of even back on this aircraft. Interesting, interesting. Shows you where their design language was going already. Even with these older airplanes, they were thinking about those protections to prevent the aircraft being put into a situation that it shouldn't be in. Worth noting as well, here I've left the speed brakes out. If I idle the power and pull the nose up, I'm not touching the speed brakes, I'm leaving them deployed. They auto retract when the throttle system kicks in to provide protection from the stall. So look at that, auto retracted, modelled as well. Very nice to see. As we lower the nose out of the stall area and accelerate the aircraft, I'll disconnect the auto thrust again. You'll see them redeploy. So they are retracting as we go to full power, even without me retracting them. So again, great to see these protections modelled on this aircraft. I think you can have a lot of fun with this airplane, a lot of versatility to be had out of an aircraft of this size, and it's a really fantastic model, and hopefully you're getting an appreciation of the sounds as well. There is no doubt, of course, it's very similar to the A310, so it's going to be up to you whether you think this aircraft is one that's for you. So something I must show you is the slides. This is a great feature. So in ground equipment, we can see that the doors in theory are green and therefore armed. So if I now open a door, such as to right, the slide should go. Now, I think this is a bug at the moment. So what I'll do is just check. Yeah, no. So what we'll do is we will... I'm going to set it red myself, and then let's open 3 right. And there you go, there's a slide. Now, of course, the engines are running, so what would happen here is the engine would just blast that slide out the way, and it would be completely useless to vacate the airplane on. So, of course, you'd have to shut down the engines. It's really important that passengers follow the instructions of the crew if this ever were to happen. It's an incredibly unusual situation to have to evacuate via slides, but if it did happen, it has to be done in the right order, and this is one of the big reasons. That engine's running, that slide is deployed, that slide will be useless. Likewise, if this door is armed and then opens, that slide is going to get sucked into the engine, or any passengers going down it are at risk of being ingested into that engine. So again, absolutely critical that people don't decide to evacuate prematurely unless there is a really, really obviously good reason to. So yeah, if it's just on the ground and you're sitting there on a runway or something, then you can see what could happen. So of course the normal situation would be to run the evacuation checklist, which would involve things like setting the parking brake, making sure that's on, and turning off the engines, of course, so these would both go off, and making sure that we've pulled any fire handles we need to, because presumably the airplane has a fire or something uncontrollable, which is why we're doing this, because you basically have to think, is it safer to be off of this airplane than it is to be on it? And in a lot of situations it is of course safer to be still on the airplane. The doors would have been armed at pushback, and then the doors would be opened up, and you'd end up in a situation something like this. Pretty exciting, pretty dramatic, and relatively, of course, thankfully, or very, I should say, rare. You can reset this in the EFB. Of course, we also have to see the A300-600RF, the freighter variant. So here it is. This, of course, is a modified version with this huge cargo door on the upper deck, as well as the normal cargo sections on the lower deck. So ini provide this model in this package, and as you can see, it's really well done. We have the full interior, as you'd expect, with 3D modeling of the cargo loading system. So that's really great. And of course, what we're really here to see is what we can load onto this airplane. So ini have done some good cargo aircraft over the years. One of my favorites was their Beluga A300-600ST, which is of course another variation on this airplane. It's had many variations. So there we go, nice big empty cargo hold. Quite strange feeling. I've never flown a cargo airliner of this scale, but if we go into the flight deck, we can see that we can choose what we want. So we can put in a racing team charter, and there it is. Excellent. Or we can put in it's in weight and balance, sorry. Go back, we could load in some posts, some custom stuff from cargo. We could have aero parts. So there you go. So that's all modeled nicely. So yeah, iniBuilds don't skimp on the cargo variants there. If that's the sort of thing you'd like to be flying around, you certainly have that option there with this aircraft. So yeah, bit of fun there. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Just a bit of a taster there of the iniBuilds A300-600R and A300-600RF. As I've said, interesting airplanes, certainly part of Airbus history and modern aviation history. They led us into this world of twin-engine long-haul aircraft and two-pilot aircraft that we have today. And that's certainly the aircraft that I have spent my the more recent years of my career on, based all around this sort of setup. As I said, this aircraft is a preview build. Thank you again to iniBuilds for sending it over. It will be a payware aircraft releasing hopefully very soon if you'd like to get your hands on it. And hopefully today's video has given you an idea of what it's all about. Yeah, I think if you are an Airbus fan, then there's a lot here to offer. And like I say, if you are familiar with the A310, this is a similar aircraft in many ways, but you can see that they've upped the game with some of the detailing and the modeling on this airplane. Really quite an interesting machine. So that's all I've got to say on it for now. We'll of course be using this in future streams and videos. I look forward to that. Do please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos with this aircraft. So for now, do please keep safe and well. We'll see you again in another video or live stream. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.